because their reality now doesn't match their TV, it doesn't match what their culture tells them, and it doesn't match all the nonsense that they have internalized. The reality of the world is not visible to white people, and there are many things that trigger dissonance for them. I am going to be reading a quote from the former president of America, President Lyndon Johnson. I am going to be reading this quote out of my mind map because I want to use his actual words. He said, "If you can convince the lowest white man he is better than the best colored man, he won't notice you are picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he will empty his pocket for you." When I look at that quote, I asked myself, who is President Lyndon Johnson talking about? Who is low in the eyes of the European 1%? The doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, or the nurses? Who is low? Because we experience this crazy behavior from all of them. So a better phrasing for me would be, if you can convince a white person that they are better than the best black person, they would not understand that you're trying to pick their pocket. Not only would they not understand it, they will willfully empty the content for you. I read this quote out because I wanted to give a little bit of an example of what the so-called European elite really think about white people and the rest of us, and every other collections of people in power who have decided to use whiteness to control their own people. In this next bit, I am going to be giving some scenarios and examples of the consequences of whiteness for white people. My first scenario is, when white people cannot be white, they often get discombobulated and confused. This behavior is something that we are all familiar with because it is human behavior. But the problem for white people is that they are reinforcing something that is not real. So I say to people, you need to stop saying that white people did this and see it for what it is. People getting confused because reality is not matching the delusion in their head. Franz Fanon identified this as cognitive dissonance. Franz Fanon was a psychiatrist from Martinique, but did most of his work in Algeria after the French was kicked out. I am going to be reading a quote from him as well, also from my mind map, because I want to use his actual words. He said, "Sometimes people hold a core belief that is very strong. When they are presented with evidence that works against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling that is extremely uncomfortable, called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief, they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit in with the core belief." Now, you think about it, that you have been told A is A over and over and over again. You have internalized this as the truth. You have bound your self-esteem to this. You have taught this to your kid that it is the absolute truth. And one morning, you wake up to hear someone saying, that is not true, you know. You get cognitive dissonance. And for white people, they have been told over and over and over and over again that they are intrinsically better than anyone else. That they are the norm of humans for hundreds of years. And now, the reality is popping out from everywhere. People from all other countries are telling and broadcasting their stories over the internet. And the reality in white people's eyes is not matching what they were fed tenaciously. And now you can see them suffering from cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is something that happens to all of us at some point in our lives because our expectations won't always match our reality. But how we deal with it determines whether we're good people or not. You can either work hard at changing your wrong beliefs, or you can defend your expectations. The defense could be denial, trying to find anything that matches your expectations, or straight up fight it somehow. And for white people, they often defend their expectations by choosing to fight, then choosing to attack the very thing that triggers their dissonance, which is you. Because their reality now doesn't match their TV, it doesn't match what their culture tells them, and it doesn't match all the nonsense that they have internalized. The reality of the world is not visible to white people, and there are many things that trigger dissonance for them. Imagine they told you that you control the best technology in the world, and you wake up to Lash Me Meter, only the UK steel industry. Or you have been told that Africans are all poor and have no money, and it was Folorunsho Alakeja, Alinko Dangote, and other people from Nigeria, Senegal, and Ghana who in 2014 together spent over £600 million on property in Belgravia, Ignite Bridge, and Kensington, the most expensive parts of London. All the charity campaigns on your TV are always asking for money for education in Africa, and the best performing students in the West, as people call it, are Africans. The list goes on. You may notice that I will often be talking about how my appearance is a trigger for these people. I tend to dress well, neatly, everywhere that I have lived, which is just normal to me. Very Nigerian. And any Nigerians that you may know will attest to this. The UK is not like this. Neatness in style is often an indicator of social status, and the basic Nigerian neatness is equivalent to middle class status or higher in the UK. I am going to go into this in details in another video, but not today. My point here is that I am talking about how racism is combined to issues of class and wealth. I have experienced the usual jealousy over having money, or some people being subservient, which is what you get sometimes. But I am talking about these active attacks, which is not the same. Please don't get distracted by me talking about wealth. When I talk to people about this, I often tell them to not get distracted by my description of wealth, to not start making judgments about me having money or not having money. I need to be able to describe my experiences properly, thoroughly, without being too careful, because I will lose all the meaning of what I am trying to say. When you talk about things that may indicate wealth, people naturally start making comparisons about their own wealth or comparing you to others. So I tell people, please follow the story and not the money. Because if I were describing, for instance, that I only buy my makeup from Harrods, you may think differently when I describe buying my makeup from Primark. Wealth differences are relevant to whiteness, but unless I am specifically mentioning that in a story, wealth is not relevant. I want to be able to explain the behavior I experience without being judged. So please, don't get distracted. So let me give you some examples of the confusion white people experience when they cannot be white. At a major UK retailer, I was trying to return a pair of trousers and also buy something else. The assistant at the beginning of the conversation, she was fine. She was giving me a good customer service, which makes sense because a good customer service requires some level of respect towards the customer. But in the middle of the transaction, it was like she realized that she was respecting me, acting normal and not being white. It was like she realized that I was not intimidated. I was just being normal and not being subservient. You could literally see her flip. She changed. She was confused and acting stressed, uncomfortable. She started shouting her words at me. She was not making sense anymore. It was almost like me not being subservient meant she wasn't white. And this totally confused and upset her. Her anxiousness over me not finding her intimidating meant that she rounded up the transaction without even charging me for what I had intended to buy. Then I told her that she didn't charge me. She insisted that she did. I told her what had just happened in front of her and tried to show her my receipt. But she wouldn't look at my receipt. She kept insisting I had paid. I left the shop without paying because me dealing with her foolishness was a complete waste of my time. Incidents like this have happened to me at least 3 times. In a large supermarket chain, I had to declare I was going to call the manager just to make sure I paid for my stuff. Another Another time, I have indulged them and let them be white. I sympathize with their anxiousness by asking them if they're having a bad day. I behaved slightly unsure of myself, pretending to be intimidated, and I was offered the last product for free. No charge, for real. At another major retailer, my husband and I were buying some clothing. The assistant could not hold in their disdain for us. They were literally flinging the clothes at us and shouting their words at us as they registered the items at the till. This is not an unusual behavior, and this has happened in many shops that I have been in. Sometimes with customer service, they won't even let you finish explaining the reason why you're there. They assume they know why you're there and immediately start trying to handle it. Even walking away to a storeroom or the back office, only for them to return a couple of minutes later having to ask me what I actually wanted. And I am there thinking, what kind of foolishness is this? If you had stayed and let me finish, you would have known what I actually wanted. You wouldn't have had to come back and ask me again. Strangely, I have only experienced this from white English people and not white people from other countries. It's as though they run away from you telling them what to do. They get so confused trying to prove they know what to do and they don't need you ordering them around that they then lose track of what they're supposed to be doing completely. Another example is this particular evening when I was coming back from work. I had just gotten off the train and I was about to get on the bus. The driver of the bus was a lady, English I think, and there was a queue of passengers. From where I was standing, she seems to be acting normally, sensibly, just having customers as they got on her bus. When it got to my turn, she then double looked at me and flipped. She changed. As I was purchasing my ticket, she started calling me darling, putting it in almost every other word, saying darling, darling, love, darling, almost continually. And this is not the sort of darling that you say when you're just being nice to someone, or adding extra words to cover your uncomfortableness, but the condescending one. It was as though she was trying to prove to herself that she was no less, saying darling in a sarcastically exaggerated way to make it clear that she was being careful to be polite, but she was not sincere at all. I went to take my seat. The interesting bit happened when I was getting off the bus. There was a queue again, but not a long queue. There was about 4 people in front of me. From where I was standing, I could see the driver looking. I noticed, but I didn't make anything of it because that's what drivers do. But then she kept looking, bending out of her cab, straining her head over a counter. And as she saw me, there was this particular look again, as though she had been searching for me. Then, as I was about to pass her, she made sure that she let me know. I hope you have a good journey, darling. This was a bit unsettling. And after I had gotten off our bus, I looked back and she was still staring at me. I looked at her and I shook my head at her, at what she was doing. Then, as a bus left, I could not help myself. I literally burst into laughter. Whilst I was laughing though, I looked around, remembering that I was on the street laughing hysterically. A bit uncomfortable now. I looked back and immediately behind me, I saw a daughter of someone that I knew. I asked her if she had just gotten off the bus. She said yes. And if the driver had called her darling. She said no. Although I kind of already knew that because the driver had gotten carried away with paying attention to me. I apologized to the teenager for my hysterical laughter and explained that I was just laughing because of something that had happened on the bus, and I asked after her mother to change the conversation. Another time, a very similar incident of this crazy behavior happened in Leeds coach station with a coach conductor. My coach was late and I was in the queue waiting. I asked one of the conductors if he knew when my coach would arrive. When he noticed me, he did a double take and started shouting his response to me. Honestly, even trying to remember later, I was unable to understand anything he said. His words were just mumbled, yelling and shouting. And this is not a matter of me not understanding an unfamiliar accent, because I have many friends from Leeds. His words were not words. Beside us, there were about 3 young women sitting on the floor, waiting. They seemed to be in their 20s. One of them saw this and jumped up, saying, "Why are you yelling at her? Why are you shouting at her? Stop talking to her like that." She remonstrated him, and the conductor stopped ranting and started speaking properly. By this time, I was in shock. Not at the conductor, but at this young white woman who had jumped up and defended me. I had never experienced anything like that before from a white person who didn't know me. And today, I remember this as a clear declaration that not every white person I may meet is infected with whiteness. Some people are still capable of instinctively doing the right thing. Another time, I was at a restaurant waiting for my husband after work. When he arrived, we requested a table. And as we were being seated, the waiter quickly started getting anxious as we confidently spoke with him. We ordered drinks, and when the waiter returned, he started getting really friendly and trying to make jokes, behaving in the way where someone overcompensates for their nervousness by pretending to themselves that you are really their friend. I had never met this person before that day. And as he got increasingly nervous, he rested his hand on my shoulder in the way that you would to a subordinate who you're joking around with, but still asserting your dominant position over them. Shocked and irritated by this, I told my husband, "Could you tell this person to get their hands off me? Because if I do it, I don't think I can be polite about it." My husband was quite charitable. He told the person, "I know you are probably just nervous and trying to settle yourself, but could you please keep your hands off my wife?" Intentionally not speaking about why the person did what he did, but only talking about the behavior, which was obviously wrong. The waiter was very apologetic, declaring that he was so sorry for being disrespectful. He was quite subservient to us throughout our meal, and even though he was mostly back to normal by the time we left, he was still unsure of himself. Yet another example of the crazy, confused behavior was when I had been out of the UK for a bit, and we had also moved home at the same time. My husband had started attending a new church where we had moved to, and had of course spoken about me to the local vicar, that he is married and his wife would be back in the UK in a few weeks. The first time I attended a new church with my husband, I was wearing a silk dress, a cashmere coat with fox fur trimmings, furs, hat, a proper formal hat fit, as is normal for most Nigerians when going to church. Upon being introduced, the vicar immediately grabbed my shoulders and started shaking me excitedly as he declared how pleased he was to finally meet me. This was crazy, and not how you expect to be greeted for the first time by anyone. We were so surprised by this that we didn't make anything of it at the time, and my husband had to remonstrate the vicar later. If I was a white woman dressing the way that I did, and he had just met me for the first time, I believe he would never have just put his hands on me. A hug may have been offered, which would still have been strange for a first-time meeting, but I mean offered, not taken. I can only conclude that he was extremely uncomfortable and insecure with how I appeared to him, and that this was so overwhelming for him that he felt the need to immediately resolve his discombobulation by assuming a crazy level of social familiarity with me. Although I still would not expect anyone to behave that way unless we have known each other for decades. These people know what they have done once it is pointed out to them. And sometimes, after this happens, they accept the correction. Unfortunately, they also often decide to attack instead. Hi everyone. Thank you for watching. Please support Nowogh Talks by hitting the like button and subscribing. Hit the notification button below and leave a comment so that we can continue the discussion.